My name's Wendy, and this is my third time being on here with Vic, and my second time doing my paranormal experience. You guys may have listened to those and heard my story, a little bit about my story, about how I've always had these paranormal experiences from the time I was a small child. I used to have dreams, and I'd have visions while awake and see spirits and things that other people don't see around me. I sense people's spirit, I guess. Everybody has their own. It's like a fingerprint. Everybody does have their own. There are people that have them that are alike, but for the most part, there is a huge difference in them. So that's how, if I know somebody in person in life, that's how I can tell sometimes who they are after death. If I don't see them, I will feel their spirit. And I've had other experiences too where spirits have solid mass. They change the sound, like as if somebody's standing near you. You can hear that whenever they're blocking off that sound. Like, say, for instance, I was at work one time, and I had this woman that was behind me, and I was, working, and my back was toward everybody else in the office. And to my back, to the left of me, was a big printer. I could hear the paper running all the time. And then at this one point, I could hear this muffling of the printer running. And it sounded like somebody was standing there, and it felt like somebody was standing there. And they had big mass. It was a big, large person. And so I turned around, and I didn't see anybody at first. And the sound kind of went with me whenever I turned. As I turned left, it kind of went left as well. And so I was starting to think, well, maybe I have an ear infection or something. Something's wrong with me. And so I went back to work, and all of a sudden I heard it again. It muffled out again, but it was starting to walk around me to the right-hand side of me. And then I could sense someone standing there. All of a sudden, this hand came in front of me and started waving in front of me. I couldn't see the body, but I could feel it. But I could see the hand, and it was in front of my face, and it just kept waving right in front of my face, up and down, as if to say, hey, I'm right here. Pay attention to me. So I turned around, and I tried to ignore it, and I just kept working. And the feeling and the sense of the person and their mass and their solid presence there became more and more noticeable. So it was getting harder for me to try to ignore this person. And so then they started whispering in my ear, telling me, hey, Margie, tell Margie. And I was like, would you please leave me alone? And so I continued to work, and they kept fanning in front of my face. And whenever I'd get up from my desk, I would leave, and come back, and there they would be. They wouldn't leave. And I knew this woman behind me that was, in a desk near me. She had a family member pass away, and she had been out of work for about a week. So I was sitting there, and he kept telling me, please go tell Sherry. Please go tell Sherry. And I was like, what do you want? I was just getting so irritated by this point. And so I went over to Sherry, and I said, Sherry, I said, did you have someone pass away here not too long ago? And she said, yeah. She said, grandfather passed away last week, and that's why I've been off all week, because of that. And I said, oh, well, I don't want to startle you or anything. And I said, I hate to bring it up, and I'm sorry for your loss, but was he a large man, like a big, large man? Not too tall, but a large, broad man? And she said, yeah, he was a very, very big man. Why? And I said, okay. I said, somebody keeps coming over and bothering me and keeps saying, go tell Sherry about Margie. And I said, I don't know what they're referring to. I said, but they're telling me to tell you that. And she said, oh my God, it sounds like my grandfather. Well, a lot of people that I worked with knew what I did. They knew my gifts and knew what I saw and things, because I would tell them things all the time. And so she wasn't surprised by this, but she said, I don't know what that would be. It must not be him. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine. If he would just leave me alone, I would be happy with that. So I left. she actually called me about 30 minutes after I got home and said, hey, she said, I called my mom, and she said, I was asking her about Grandpa and asking to see if he knew anybody named Margie. And she said her mother said, well, yeah, that's his sister Margie. Why? What are you talking about? And she told her what I was saying. So it was nice to know that it was actually somebody that she knew, but he came back to me and started communicating again and telling me to tell Margie that it was okay, just to keep telling Sherry to tell Margie that it was okay. Well, I told her that, and she turned around and told her mother that, and her mother just started crying and said, Margie will be so happy to hear that. And I said, would you mind filling me in and telling me exactly why? I mean, I would just like to know, because it's just like puzzle pieces to me, and I don't get sometimes to know the reason why and what the conversation's about. I was just a messenger. She said that Margie was in her 90s and she was too ill to come to his funeral. And she was so heartbroken that she didn't get to come to his funeral, that she had been crying for like 2 days in the bed crying because she was so upset about that. And he wanted her to tell Margie that it was okay, that he knew exactly why. And so her mother called me later and said that she had went and told Margie that, and Margie was just so relieved that he had said that. And they knew that that's who that was their father and Sherry's grandfather. Well, I had experiences like this my whole life. One, this female at work passed away. Her name was Deanna. And I didn't know her that well. She was an acquaintance at work, and I knew that she had gotten sick, just all of a sudden gotten sick, and she was, in her late 20s, so she didn't have anything wrong with her. She was just as healthy as anybody else. All of a sudden, she got really sick, and she was in the hospital, and within 5 days, her bodily functions had stopped, her organs had stopped working, and she passed away. Well, me and a lot of my coworkers, we went and we showed our respects. I walked into the funeral home, and her mother and her husband was standing at her casket. I was there with a good friend of mine, Diane, who had passed away June. It's been a year ago. In June, she passed away, but she was with me that day in life. And I walked up to Deanna's husband, and I shook his hand to show my condolences, and images started running through my head about just pictures. It's like a movie playing inside my head of things that I see that come across whenever somebody shakes my hand, or if I see a picture of somebody, or I can just be passing by people and see images of things that, they have done or will do or whatever. Well, whenever I shook his hand, all these images started coming through of him with another woman and him putting pine sol and stuff in her food. Well, I thought, you're crazy. You've been watching too many crime shows and listening to too many crime podcasts or whatever. You're losing your mind. It's not, what it is. So I just blew it off and went over and shook her mother's hand and everything, and I let it go. Well, I told my friend Diane about it. And Diane, she knows my gifts. And she was like, Wendy, you've got to tell her mother about that. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea for me to do that. And she said, no, you've got to tell her. And I said, oh, what if I'm wrong, though? And she said, but what if you're right? So I just kept putting it off and putting it off. Well, I came downstairs one day whenever I was at work, and there stood Deanna. There was this open hallway with the windows facing the parking lot. She was all backlit, and she was standing there, and she was pointing at her old desk. So I went over to her old desk, and she was pointing at her hair on her desk. Her hair was still laying on the desk, I guess, from where, I don't know, she just fell out whenever she was sitting there. She told me to take that to her mother and just have some research done on it, that she would find pine sol in her hair strand. I talked to Diane about it, and she told me that she thought it was a good idea. So did end up taping that hair to a letter that I had written to her mother. And I did send it off to her mother. But I never heard anything from her mother. I don't know what had happened there, but maybe her mother didn't believe me or whatever. People do that. People don't believe what I say, and that's their choice. But she ended up finding out herself. I guess she may have started researching it herself, but found out that he did, in fact, have another female on the side, and he got married like 2 weeks later to someone else. And so that'll always stay with me. People always, if it's not that, people will have me come to their house and cleanse their houses or, try to see if there's spirits in their homes. I had someone come to me once and asked me to come to a house that she grew up in that her father had passed away in. It was in Rockford, Tennessee. I went over to the house and her father started talking through me, and telling her some things that, was personal to her. And that's usually what they do. They usually will tell me things that only the other person that I'm communicating with will know what it means. And there is no other way that I would know what they were talking about, because it's a very personable experience for them. And they know exactly what that communication is for, but I don't. After I had been speaking with her father, other experiences, she was telling me about other experiences that had been going on in the house. I felt a presence down in the basement underneath the stairwell of the house. Well, there was a lot of young guys that lived in this house. They were always picking and prodding at this spirit. And I would tell them, don't do that. While I'm here, please do not do that. I don't want that, because you can aggravate that spirit and you're feeding it energy, and that spirit can hurt you. I mean, they can get physical with you. Well, while I was there, they said there was another female. They thought there was a female in the house, and I ended up communicating with her. She actually ran the dryer during the day. She would go downstairs and run the dryer. She led me out to the woods that was near their house. And there was this old house that had wiring on the outside of it with light bulbs and stuff on the outside of it. I guess they had wired it after, electricity became available. But there were two twins that led me to that house, and they come up and they started telling me about things that their father had done to them. Horrible, horrible things that their father had done to them. And I was standing out in the yard and I was talking to them, and all these people started gathering around me that were in the neighborhood. This man came up to me and he said, "You're talking about those twin girls that were here years and years ago, aren't you?" And I said, "I don't know. I just see that they lived in this house." And he said, "Their father killed them whenever they were about 8 years old. And rumor had it that he had been messing with those girls and everything, and beating them and abusing them. So those girls were showing me things that I didn't care to see, but they did." Well, these guys kept messing with the spirit inside the house. Kept saying, "Oh, you're not big and bad. Come over here and mess with me." And well, it came running up the stairs with all of them watching, and you could hear it running up the stairs, that you could hear its footsteps running up the stairs. And as soon as it got up to the top of the stairs, you could feel the presence. It went all the way to the ceiling, and it was very angry, and it knocked one of the guys down on his back, and you could hear it trampling over him and running after the other ones. At this point, I started to cleanse the house. The only way you can cleanse a house is in the name of Jesus. This is the only way, because I used to try to cleanse houses with sage. That doesn't work. The only thing that gets rid of them is the name of Jesus. And speaking of Jesus, he's where I get these gifts. One time I was at work again. I had a lot of experiences at work. I was in a different location, and my back, of course, was to everyone. I was near the front doors of the office, and people would come by and they would disturb me, like to talk to me and stuff. I would get in trouble at work. So I put up a little streamer at one end of my desk to the other behind me. So if anybody came up behind me, I could hear them so that they wouldn't startle me, because people would come up and startle me and I would scream out and I would get in trouble because, the office was very quiet. Well, this woman came up behind me one day, and she's the reason why I put the streamer up, because she came up behind me, jerked my desk and my chair so hard that it almost flipped me out on the floor, and I screamed very loudly. Well, after, that, I put the streamer up so that I could hear somebody else walking up behind me if that were the case. This other woman came up behind me. Before, she had come up behind me and told me, your desk is all homey, it's nice and cozy here. She was just making friendly conversation. And, of course, I didn't mind that. But then she came back by after I'd put up the streamer, and she didn't speak to me. And she gave me this look, and I thought, why is she looking at me like that? Well, God told me in my stomach. He tells me this stuff, and I feel it in my stomach. It's strange. But he told me that I had offended her. He said, you need to go tell her that she is not the reason that you put that streamer up. You need to go tell her. And I said, I can't do that. If I do that, she's going to think I'm crazy. Well, I've always thought that I don't want people to think I'm crazy, but I've now come to terms with it. If people do, then I'm sorry, but it is what it is. So I waited for about 3 months before I said anything to her. It just got to where it was so heavy on me, him wanting me to tell her that it wasn't her and she wasn't the reason why, and please not to be offended. I went over to her, and she was sitting at her desk, and I said, hey, I've got something to tell you, Margaret. And she goes, okay, well, what is it? And I said, well, don't be shocked and don't think I'm crazy, first of all, whenever I do tell you this. I said, but she said, I really want to know who told you that. I said, don't be worried about, coming over there. I didn't mean to offend you. I didn't mean to offend you about telling you, or putting up the streamer. That wasn't for you. And she said, who told you that? Who told you that offended me? And I said, don't worry about who told me. It's just, I didn't want to offend you. And I just wanted you to know that it wasn't you. It was somebody else that had come up to my desk previously and had, jerked my chair and almost threw me out on the floor. And I screamed, and I had gotten in trouble for it. So that's the reason why I put the streamer up. And she said, no, I really want to know. And I said, okay, you really want to know? I'm going to tell you. God told me that. He told me to tell you that 3 months ago. And I have been sitting on it because I was afraid that you were going to tell me that I was nuts. And she just looked at me like I'd slapped her across the face. And I said, well, I just want you to know, please, don't be offended. I've got to go. I'm going to go back to work. So I was back at my desk, and I was talking to another lady, and we was standing there talking, and Margaret came up to me and she said, first of all, I don't mean to interrupt you, but she said, if God has anything else to tell me, you tell me immediately. Don't wait 3 months. And I said, why do you say that? And she said, because nobody else knew that I got offended. She said, that's the reason why I was asking you who told you that, because I hadn't told anybody. And I said, well, that's just how he works. That's part of my gift. He does tell me these things, and it weighs on me. I guess he's given me these other gifts. I'm not really entirely sure what I'm supposed to do with them. I'm always having dreams of casting out demons. I'm constantly having dreams about that. I don't know if that's something that he's trying to tell me that I'm supposed to do with it, because in the Bible it does say that we should be able to do the works that he done, and greater are the works that we should be able to do if we believe in him, believe in Jesus. So it really amazes me, all the things that this gift entails. It's really, in a way, been a curse to me most of my life. It's the way I felt. It was a curse to me because of some of the things that I see that people do, some of the things that I have seen them do in their past as they walk by me, or things that I feel whenever I walk through cemeteries. I used to play in cemeteries a lot because it was interesting to me, all the things that I saw there and all the things that I felt there. Some things I didn't like feeling there, but some things I did. I mean, sometimes it was very peaceful. Some people that I pass have very dark things going on in their lives. Other people that I pass, I feel peace among them. Everybody has a story, but not everybody's story shows, because I can't read everybody. Some people I just can't. It's like they have on an iron suit that I can't penetrate. So I can't read them. But in helping people find missing people, or helping people who would like to speak to a loved one, I used to do a lot. But now, seeing people in pictures, I do help the police department with finding missing people. I helped the police department find a missing man back a year ago, November. They had found him. He had went missing 5 years prior, and my cousin had actually shown me a picture of this man because they knew who he was, but I didn't. He lived in their neighborhood, and I had no idea who this man was. But my cousin had sent me a picture and said, "What do you see whenever you see him?" I saw him riding in an ATV vehicle. It was side by side, they call it. It was white, and it had bright green on it with black mixed in it. And I saw him drive off the side of a bluff on a logging road, and his ATV flipped over on its top. He had passed away in it, and it was still on its top. Well, I had spoken with the police about it and went over to try to help with the investigation. They, not to give detail, but due to it being a police matter, they did eventually find him. The ATV was exactly like I said, flipped over upside down. It was the exact color. He actually did flip it off the bluff, and they found him. I told them that they would have to have a helicopter to pull it out, and they did. They pulled it out with a helicopter. I've helped find elderly people who have gotten out of the, homes that they're in, the assisted living homes and whatnot, and they've gone missing. And so I go and I look at a picture of them to see if I get anything from them. If I do, I will leave messages to the people, that the family's looking for them to, give them information or insight. But the problem is a lot of people don't believe in it. But those who do, it benefits. It always benefits. And I don't mind helping others with that. And I don't know if that's a part of the reason why I'm supposed to have this gift. I do believe that it is for, the kingdom of God somehow, some way, that it's supposed to be used for that. Why else would I have it? I think it's just to help prove who he is. I don't know what else to do with this gift. Like I said, in previous stories, I may have mentioned that I used to do readings for people before I realized, that it's a godly gift and that's what I'm supposed to use it for. But I did do readings for people, and whenever they would have reading parties for me, people would gather around in like groups of 20 to 30, and I would read for them. I would sit and, they thought I was palm reading, but I wasn't. I was just, getting what I could get off of them whenever I was with them, and the pictures and stuff that I saw, little movies that would play in my head of things. This other woman came to me at work, and I read for her, and I saw something really bad that was going to happen to her, and it involved a car accident. And I was telling her to be careful, showing her, what it looked like around and whatnot. She got scared and told her mother, which her mother told my manager, and I got into trouble. Well, I didn't know exactly who it was that had told on me, but it was fine. I was getting used to being in trouble at work for that. She came up to me later and told me that the thing that I had told her was exactly what happened to her like a month later, and it scared her so bad. That's the reason why she told what she did. I said that just to say this, that some people, it scares them so bad that they look at me different. And a lot of people say that whenever I'm seeing something, that they can see it in my eyes, that I'm actually looking at something that's not there to them visibly. So that kind of scares people. But I'm really not a scary person. I just happen to have this gift. And if I can bring closure or peace or the evidence of who God is and the Holy Spirit, then that is great. But if other people are too afraid, that's their prerogative. That's them. If I do ever have any other stories that come to me, I'm sure I'll reach out to Vic and let him know, and maybe he can have me on again. But as for now, that's my paranormal experiences.
My paranormal experiences started when I was really young. I would know things that there was no way of me knowing them. I would be able to say who was going to call immediately before they called. I would do things like that would really freak my parents out a lot. Know things that there's no way that I could have known. It was unusual because I remember seeing like a shadow figure type of thing in my room when I was young growing up, and it was really scary. But thank goodness we moved from that place. And when we moved to a completely different city. It was a much different experience when we lived there. The energy was way different. The spirits seemed to be really friendly, even though I didn't really see them, but you knew they were there. Like you would be home alone and you could hear footsteps and stuff like that. When I was 14, I happened to be home alone one day. Nobody else was in the house, and we had an old Victorian house that we lived in, and it had very steep stairs like a lot of Victorian homes do. I had tripped and fell, and somebody grabbed me, pulled me backwards, and sat me down. And when I turned around to thank them, there was nobody there. After that experience, nobody could ever convince me that ghosts weren't real. I didn't really have too many experiences in between that for a little while. Once I moved out of that house until approximately 2016. Let me go back to when a couple of years after I was 14, when I was 17, I was dating this guy, and he took me to one of his friends' house. I had never met them, never been over there. I asked if I could have a glass of water. And when I went to walk into the kitchen, I couldn't walk into the kitchen, and they said, "What's the matter?" I had told them somebody had hung themselves in your dining room to the left here. And I said, "But that doesn't make any sense because there's a window right there. Why would somebody hang themselves when there's a window?" And they got this really shocked look on their face. And they had told me that nobody knew that the people that they bought the house from, the gentleman that had built the house, had hung himself there. And the only one that had disclosed that was the people that sold the house to them, and that the window actually wasn't there before, that they put it there themselves, and nobody knew that had prior knowledge of the homeowner hanging himself except for the people that sold them the house. And they said, "How did you know that?" And I couldn't explain how I knew it. I just knew it. And they got really upset and asked me to leave. I was pretty traumatized by the experience because it wasn't like I was trying to cause trouble, or it wasn't like I could explain to them because I didn't understand myself how I knew. It traumatized me for a long time to where if I knew something, I wouldn't say anything, because the way people treated you back then, it was really hard to be yourself. So I really shut down for a really long time, really didn't talk about the paranormal too much or talk about me being gifted or anything like that. And I really didn't understand my gifts at the time either. So then fast forward to about 2016, I went to the Whitney in Detroit, and I went on a what they call paranormal dinner, where you get to have dinner, you get to meet a paranormal team, and then you get to investigate with them afterwards. I was super excited. It was so nice that you could openly talk about the paranormal and not feel chastised like I did or how I felt when I was younger. So I got there really early, and it was really weird because it was in the evening, and normally when you're driving through Detroit, the traffic is super crazy, and it was just amazing because I had no traffic. I was able to get right there. So I actually showed up early because of how easy it was to get there and how easy parking was, because they had valet parking. And when I got there, they told me I could go up to what they called the ghost bar and have a drink while I was waiting for everybody, because I had like a good half hour before everyone else was supposed to be there. So I did. I went up there and I had a drink. And what I did was I needed to use the restroom. And it was so weird because the moment I walked through the doorway into the restroom, it was like walking into a time warp, as if you'd step back in time 100 years. It's so weird, so bizarre, and how to explain how it felt, but that's what it felt like you had walked through like some kind of, I don't know if you'd call it like a wormhole or a portal or something, but it was just bizarre because you felt like you were at a different time and place. And I had a really hard time breathing. And the second that I walked back out of that restroom, because it took my breath away so much that I actually had to use my inhaler. And it took me like over 5 minutes to be able to catch my breath. I was very shocked that before anyone else had been there, that we did the dinner, that we did met the paranormal team, or even had the paranormal investigation, that I had already had a paranormal experience. But I was so intrigued by trying to explain what had happened that I was really drawn into getting all the answers that I could get for trying to explain my experience. So I had joined my paranormal team in 2017, and I just have not stopped learning ever since. I've had so many experiences, good and bad, and it really shapes on how I do things, because being gifted and not having anybody to talk to was extremely hard. And then having children that were gifted was challenging because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. And I always believed everything they said, but I had no way to guide them. I didn't know, like, say, okay, well, we need to do this or we need to do that. So when I started really getting into the paranormal, I wanted to learn as much as I could. So not only to explain my own personal experiences that I've had my whole life, but to try to be able to guide and help other families so they wouldn't have to go through what I went through, and to have a child believe them when the child was explaining to them what they were experiencing, because it was stuff that I had experienced my whole life. There's nothing worse than having a child be very descriptive and telling you what they're seeing or what they're experiencing, and them not feeling safe in their own home, and you taking steps to be able to help them feel safe in their home. I'm very blessed that I have learned so much from being on the team, from personal experience, from learning from other people that have been amazing mentors to me. Going into a house and being able to feel different energies that are there, trying to figure out how to connect with the spirits and trying to figure out how to move them on. or how to alleviate the situation that somebody's having in their home. I ran into a situation where I was volunteering at a business to help a lot of senior citizens, but it was definitely available. It was an Eagles club. So, I mean, you had people from all ages, but it really had a lot of older people there, a lot of people that were retired. And it was so unique because from the moment that I started volunteering there, I started having paranormal experiences. So I started asking questions and started talking to people and started finding out that it was a lot of really negative stuff that was going on. I would actually say that this was the first time I actually had to directly work with something that you could say that was malevolent. I wasn't sure what to do, but I had great mentors that helped me and said, you can do this. You can figure this out. You can alleviate the situation. And so even though I was really scared, I followed their advice. I took the steps that they explained for me to take. I was very pleased that I actually was able to help cleanse the place and alleviate the situation. So that made me feel like I had done something important, that I was truly helping and that I could help make a difference, not only for businesses, but for people in their homes. About that time, I was learning how to be a Reiki master. Being in the paranormal and being an energy healer, both at the same time, really just motivated me to help people, make them feel safe in their homes. And I have helped numerous people alleviate situations in their home. I'll give you an example. One case that I had was a daycare, and the former homeowner was not a nice person. He was tormenting this entire family of gifted people. They didn't realize that they were gifted. That was a whole nother set of issues that they had, because when you're gifted, spirits can see you, they're drawn to you. If you don't know, like a lot of times you can live your whole life and not really have anything happen and move into a home and then have all kinds of crazy things happen. And this poor family, I just felt so bad for them, and I really wanted to help alleviate the situation. It was my job to figure out how to connect with the homeowner, the spirit that was there, that was not being very nice to them, and convince him to cross over so it could alleviate the whole situation. So what I had came up with is that I told him that if he crossed over, he could stay in the house and that nobody would bother him. Nobody would want him to leave. But if he didn't cross over, I was going to have to cleanse the house and seal it, and he wouldn't get back in the house. And he loved that house. That was actually enough to get him, and he actually did cross over. It took us a little bit because at first he wasn't too happy about the situation, but he really wanted to stay in the house. And once we got him to cross into the light, the energy in the entire house just changed. It was such a huge difference. The lady was running a daycare out of her house, so not only was it important to make her family feel safe, but the other children that were there as well. It was such a great feeling to know that you had made such a huge difference. So I just have not stopped doing that. It's just something I absolutely love to do. I help mentor families now. I wish I would have had somebody to mentor me and to help me and help guide me the way that I do other families now when I was younger, and especially after I had kids. So I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity to help people, even though I didn't have the opportunity for that to happen for me. Those are a lot of my paranormal experiences.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.